Hey
Welcome back,
everybody,
everyone.
welcome. I'm here with Zeb Smith and Aaron Bannon. I'm Hillary with America Outdoors, and I am just here as your logistics person today. I am going to be taking care of basically running the webinar and making sure that everything's going smoothly, as well as asking questions to Zeb and Aaron. So on that note, if you want to go ahead and pop a hello into the questions box, feel free. You can test that out now and kind of locate it. But as Zeb is going with his presentation, you can write in questions throughout, and then we're actually going to take questions and answer them at the end of the presentation. If anyone's having trouble with audio during this presentation, I do recommend to log off of the computer and call back in on your phone, which all that information is in the email that you received from GoToWebinar. And if you're still having issues, then you can, get back on and type it into the question box, and I'll work on it for you. I'm going to hand it over to Aaron, and then we'll get going.
Thank you so much, Hillary, and thank you, Zeb Smith, for joining us. I'm going to introduce Zeb to you all briefly, and I'm going to take a step back. He has a great presentation designed for you on how to know where you are at in your company with your resources, not just financially, but certainly financially, and using that to make an informed decision in a crisis as we find ourselves in. Zeb's a CPA. He's a commercial member of America Outdoors, and he's participated in our conference, and he's been engaged with outfitters for many years. He's an expert in financial management, and we're happy to have him here. So Zeb, with that, we look forward to your presentation.
Awesome. Yeah, Aaron, thank you so much for the introduction. Hillary, thank you for facilitating all of this. And guides, outfitters, hello. So as Aaron mentioned, I am Zeb Smith. I'm a CPA located in Durango, Colorado. So I've been in public practice since 2011. And starting in 2016, I started working very closely with outfitters and operators. So personally, I am a Colorado kid, born native in Gunnison, Colorado. As most of you know, it's a very tourist-rich community with lots of fishing, rafting, hunting, hiking, and all things outdoors. In that time period, I've experienced a decent amount firsthand, being part of the outdoor tourism world for the majority of my life. And my heart is with you guys and all you do. That's why I love working with you so much and really want us as a community to thrive through this thing. So I've provided my email information here. At any time, please feel free to reach out. I'm currently doing one-on-one phone calls and virtual meetings with outfitters and operators on this stuff that we are talking about on like a daily basis. So if I can take you off the ledge, bring comfort, peace of mind, some clarity to where you're at financially and where you're going directionally, like I'm super happy to do that for you. Also, I have a very active Facebook group that's called Outfitters and Guides Business Strategies. So this is where I'm personally posting lots and lots of information, as well as stimulating discussions surrounding the topics that we're going to go through today, as well as the coronavirus and the resources that are available to you. The group that's currently there is amazing and proactive in helping each other get through this. So I encourage you to join if you're not already a member. Okay. So continuity planning, how to survive COVID-19 and thrive when it has passed. So the steps we're going to go through is based on a tried and true, generally accepted continuity planning framework. However, I'm not going to bore you with the specific textbook stuff. Rather, I've captured a lot of the relevant components based on what outfitters are experiencing today. And this is what we're tirelessly working on to find clarity and direction, like navigating through this issue, okay? This is very high level stuff. It might seem like a no-brainer, and a lot of it, you're right, it is when our heads are screwed on. But when we've started to like lose some clarity, and when we get pinched with these unfortunate times, we tend to forget the basics, and this is simply a reminder. Even though a lot of this stuff might seem simple, don't dismiss it. The order with which and the steps we're going to go through and how I present this stuff is what's most important, and this is the order with which you're going to want to execute accordingly. Okay. So a quick question is, what is business continuity planning and what is a business impact analysis? Okay, so to do a quick Google search and to define it, is that business continuity planning is the process involved in creating a system of prevention and recovery from potential threats to a company. The plan itself ensures that personnel and assets are protected and able to function quickly in the event of a disaster. From there, we do a business impact analysis, which is a systematic process to determine and evaluate the potential effects of an interruption to critical business operations as a result of a disaster, accident, or emergency. Okay. From a visual, this is how the structure of it's set up, and we're going to break out particular pieces that are relevant to working with the outfitters today in the current climate. The business continuity planning essentially is this component. So this is where we would go through and do some risk identification, perform an impact analysis, identify responses, develop the plan, and then train and exercise and maintain the key employees to go through a disaster. In theory, these would be components that are evaluated throughout a year and known when a disaster takes place, how we're going to handle it. Then once the emergency happens, out of surprise, we're confident in what those plans are to be able to manage the crisis, to then develop a continuity response, and to be able to handle the recovery. Okay, most of us haven't gone through and actually done this up until this point. So what we're working on is essentially reminding ourselves of these components. We're right here today where we're finally over this initial shock and we're looking to start moving forward and trying to answer questions on what the future is going to bring. So that's really the timing of where we're at. Throughout the whole process, there's a really dire need for regular communication amongst our employees, our vendors, as well as amongst ourselves, and then we always need to be able to monitor and review the process. Okay. So the final textbook component is that there are particular mission critical efforts that must continue within a business through a crisis. The first and foremost is branding, is knowing what it is that we have built, what it is that we stand for, what is it that we're not willing to lose. Our finances, making sure our finances are in order, that our operations are in a position to be able to support the business for the next year. Should there be income that starts to come in, that we can capture that. Logistically, we know how to be able to run. This is where you guys are, and the people that I work with are phenomenal at. You just know your operations to a T. You're usually really strong in this component. In terms of a crisis, we need to be able to know how we develop and change our operations to be able to fit that moment. We have our customers, making sure that our customers are comfortable and are being thought of, top of mind, and are being involved in what we're doing. And then also there's compliance and contractual obligations. So I'm not going to go through the compliance and contractual obligation stuff so much. That's where there's a lot of other really good resources in that America Outdoors specifically has to really help you with those components. So what we're doing with the outfitters today is, in particular, we're looking at 3 individual phases within this broader business continuity planning. Okay, the first phase is where we look internally. So we want to know, we want to remind ourselves of the foundation. We want to tell ourselves who we are, remind ourselves who we are, what's most important to us. We want to look at our finances and assess our own risk tolerances. We want to be able to triage out the non-financial assets, which are our employees, our customers, and our vendors. So this is really the discovery phase of looking internally to see what resources do we currently have and where are our strengths, right? From there, we want to look externally. So we want to fill in the gaps based on what we learned. We want to be able to team up using other resources that are available to us. And from there, we want to build and execute a plan. We want to monitor this plan, we want to adjust, and when we monitor and adjust through the course of this, that's how we're able to thrive. So following these 3 phases, what we learn in the first phase helps us pinpoint and navigate and make decisions throughout the rest. So the information that we capture and looking at our business internally, then as we start to look externally and start to build a plan, all of that information, all that knowledge is compounding, and it helps us bring peace of mind and comfort in a methodical order to where as we learn more, the more comfortable we become. Okay. So the first phase is when we look internally, okay? We want to remind ourselves what is our foundation. So do this for yourself as well as do it for your business. As the owner of our business, we are the people, the CEOs that everybody's looking to and seeking direction from. It's super important as the leader and as the owner to remind ourselves, like, what is our own personal purpose and like what is it that we're here for. We want to use this as our GPS to really keep us grounded and to keep us focused so we can lead the others that are here amongst our organization. It helps us really even filter through a lot of the noise and a lot of the distractions that are going on right now, and helps us pinpoint what is most relevant to us and in particularly our own business. And that gives us the confidence to be able to say no to those things that don't really matter. When we look at the business itself, when it comes to the branding component, we want to know what is it that we have built, what is our culture, what are we as a community most proud of, and what is it that through this disruption we're not willing to give up. So writing all of these pieces out, reminding ourselves like who we are and what our purpose is, and writing out like all of those components that we hold most important and what we're not willing to give out, write it out and become really comfortable with it and become really confident in it. Keep it in front of you, and it's a really good driving point. It's a really good frame of reference to help us make decisions moving forward. The second piece we want to look at is we want to look at currently, like, what's our own financial health. So starting with the owners, before we get at the business, we want as owners to look at what our own risk tolerance is. And speaking to the owner operators specifically, those that aren't bigger corporations but more have a team of like 20 or less guides most often, is you need to remind yourself that you are really the #1 key employee for your business, and to make sure that you're taken care of first. So if things were to hit the fan, what is it that you as the owner can afford to lose financially, and how much can you afford to float in the business and potentially not get back? We want to become real comfortable, and we want to be real honest with ourselves about this, and we want to really tackle this head on. From there, it makes it, we know what our potential losses are, or the risk tolerance that we have. It's really easy to start to seek external funding or start to look at other different options. So for your homework as the owners, I want you to proactively find how much you need to make to take care of yourself and your family for the next year. Look at your own personal financial situation, define this, and know it. So from there, we want to look at the business itself, okay? So looking at your business, where's your current financial health of the business? Is it cash rich or is it cash poor, okay? Cash rich businesses right now are in a very good position. They're writing things out, and a lot of them have options. Some owners I worked with have a full year's worth of operations, and they're really able to monitor, and they're not stressing about things, right? However, when we're cash poor and we have usually like 3 months or less of reserves, things are a lot harder. So we'll have to make quicker decisions, and we'll have to potentially look at external funding depending on different scenarios that play out over the course of the next year. Specifically, when it comes to the finances, we want to look at our business's operations and split out 3 different buckets, okay? So looking at our profit and loss for the last 12 months, and this is an exercise that I've been going through with the outfitters for the last couple weeks in really evaluating what their spending is, okay? So looking at profit and loss for the last 12 years, separate that out into 3 different buckets. We want to capture what is our known cost of sales. So last year when we were operating, what did we spend? What are the items that go into directly selling our trips. So oftentimes these are our guide wages, these are the transportation costs, these are the meals, these are the components that we have to deliver on when we sell. If we can separate those out and know that those are only going to impact us and our finances when we go to sell, it's a lot easier for us to start dissecting the other financial commitments of our business. Those other financial commitments are our operating costs, and that's the money to run the business, okay? Within those operating costs, we have fixed and variable costs. So the fixed costs are going to be our existing debts, our outstanding contracts that we have, being our leases, the commitments we already have with our vendors. It's going to be the customer balances, the deposits that we've collected that could potentially be repaid. It's going to be the wages for our key employees. And then it's going to be also the money that we need as owners to be able to pay ourselves to get through potentially till next summer. Okay. The other operating costs are the variable costs. So these costs are going to be the non-delivery items that are variable based on the business. The most common one that most people are familiar with is going to be advertising. It's also going to include your non-key employees, such as like office personnel or other individuals who aren't necessarily going to be employed potentially through the downside, but don't directly relate to the delivery of what we're selling, okay? If you do need a shutdown, also the other thing we wanna look at is what are gonna be our reboot costs for next year, okay? The other thing is at this point, we wanna think about what are the other expenses that we could potentially incur that we're not thinking of already. So itemize all of these items out. Itemize out the fixed costs, the existing debts, the operating contracts, the customer balances that need paid, key employees, reboot costs, everything. What's the total? That's the amount that we need to have set up either in our own personal reserves or that we need to seek financing for to be able to open the doors next year. Reflecting on the cash balances, do the current existing cash balances cover this? If so, we're in good shape. If not, we need to start seeking the funding for the business, whether that be owner funding, investors, or debt. So the other components that we also want to know as we're starting to look into projections is what's our break-even point and our gross profit margins. These are the pieces that really help us on making projections, and when we're playing what-if scenarios, we can figure out like how many boats do we need to run to be able to operate this year. We need to figure out what our sales points needs to be. We know these items to help us navigate month by month really what's going to take place through the season. When you know these figures, it makes deciding whether to keep your doors open, to shut down, to be fully staffed, or to basically be like half staff until something happens like mid-season or until we notice something else on a recovery, okay? So after we've looked at our foundation, our finances, the next internal component that we want to evaluate are going to be our key stakeholders. The first key stakeholder is going to be employees. We're going to look at our customers as well as our vendors. So with each of these, we're going to continue to triage them and find the most valuable of each and best leverage them to get through the situation. We're going to connect with the best and really leverage their strengths. In an economic downturn, depending on where you're at financially, you may end up losing some people. Becoming comfortable with this idea and using the information discovered through this whole process, this discovery process, and the scenario planning and the timing of each is going to really bring comfort and peace of mind to like how we execute and how we handle each of these different stakeholders. When it comes to the employees, so in the business continuity planning framework, we identify those mission critical efforts that must continue. When it comes to key employees, we want to make sure that each of these different components are covered. So the branding piece, this is if we have a person associated with it, it's going to be a CEO. Finances, your CFO, operations, COO, okay? Smaller operations may not have individuals specifically set aside or specifically working in and leading each of these different initiatives. But if that's our case, we then need to make sure that we have resources available to us to really support these initiatives and to make sure that these initiatives are being taken care of. With these key employees, we want to make sure to connect them, we want to engage with them, and we want to leverage their strengths. The second key non-financial asset is going to be our customers. Okay. Do not leave your customers in the dark through this process. We're going to want to reach out, and most of you have already done this. You've done a very good job in terms of responding to the initial freakouts and the requests for deposits and refunds. People are continuing to cancel on trips, so maybe we're seeing drops in future reservations, and handling those and being really open and honest with them and being transparent with them is very good. Proactively, we want to start to look at like who our top customers are, and we want to evaluate who these top customers are often and figure out where their comfort levels are and where their needs are at. We want to always be present with these individuals and continue to establish loyalty with them. And essentially, when the rebound takes place and we start to build more confidence, or the economy starts to build more confidence and people start traveling again, we as a business want to be the first organization they reach out to start traveling. So we want to be top of mind for these individuals on getting outside. The best way to do this is going to be through the standard organic grassroots marketing. So connect with your new targets customers. My guess is through this rebound, the local travelers are going to be the first ones to really come out and gain confidence and want to start traveling. We're probably not going to see much global travel for a long time, and probably not much national travel for a while, but the local travel is going to be people who utilize our trips. So connect with the locals and adjust services if we need to, based on what the information is that you're learning from them, and use their concerns as a way to restructure and sell services accordingly. So the discussions that we've been having with the outfitters the last couple of weeks is considering like a per boat charge, instead of selling by the seat, selling by the boat. That way we can leverage the social distancing. We can be cognizant of these concerns on people not wanting to be around others, right? So to have an exclusive boat offering is a good idea. The other thing about like the local customers, if we do have employees, so I know Aaron's been staying up to date on the CARES Act, and there's a lot of financing that's in there that's available to be able to pay for your employees for equivalent of like 2.5 months. If you have free employees, we can use those employees to get out in front of our customers, get out in front of our local communities, be present with them, show them that we care for the environment, that we're doing river cleanups, that we're helping out local organizations with, like, I don't know, you can go out and mow lawns if you need to, but be present with them, because when they're seeing you and if they see you contributing, they're going to be really supportive on supporting you when this rebound takes place. So the customers and being cognizant and aware of those customers is crucial. With that, we don't have to invest too much in marketing when it comes to like the grassroots, and like what I'm talking about specifically here with the organic local economy work is that you can use like cell phones. We have these devices everywhere to capture us doing these good deeds and make sure it's known and present across the internet. There's a ton of people on the internet right now, and to be present with those individuals and to show like who you are and your values and what you stand for can be a really good way to continue to be top of mind for when this economy rebounds and when we start to recover from this. So the third non-financial asset that we have within our businesses are our vendors. These are the individuals. They want you to be just as successful as you do, okay? So you already have existing relationships with a lot of these vendors. Leverage those relationships, increase your level of communication with them, consider modifying your agreements and payment terms, and really start to work with them. Also, there's an ability to leverage their expertise. There's a lot of really good depth that's out there and available to help you outfitters and your businesses connect with those individuals and really make sure that you're setting up and using them to help you grow your business and also get through this and then thrive thereafter. When you're looking at your current existing vendor relationships, critically look at each and triage them, just like what we've done with your key employees and your finances, and say which of these vendors are going to be pivotal in maintaining our brand and maintaining and helping us really evolve past this whole disruption to where we can thrive through it into the future. So after we've evaluated all of those pieces, so once we've looked internally, we've looked at our employees, our customers, our vendors, we've reflected on our purpose, we've set our missions, our values, and we have a lot of clarity on where we're at internally. We want to evaluate these assets and really use that as our foundation for starting to move forward. And how, before we start to go externally, we want to do a SWOT analysis and looking at what we've discovered, what are our strengths, what are the weaknesses. So given the financial position and current team, where are our strengths at? Given my financial position and the current team, where are my weaknesses? Based on the customers I've connected with and the current economic outlook, what opportunities are available to start generating sales, and what other threats have I not considered? And from that, that's where we start to look external. Okay, we've looked internal, we've become really comfortable with what our institution is, where our strengths, where our weaknesses are at, and now we're going to start seeking external help. Where are the gaps? Where do we need financially to be able to sustain this downturn and to rebound as late as next summer? Where are looking at the different critical components, such as the finances, the operations, the compliance, all of that, where are the gaps, and start to find other resources that are available to you and team up with those resources. After we've done that, that's now when we really start to build and execute this plan. So the recovery plan itself. Key components that we're talking about today with outfitters is where's their cash flow going to be? How are we communicating with our resources? And how are we staying mobile in terms of monitoring and adjusting as we continue to learn more, and especially with the changes in governments and the closures that are taking place in terms of where the virus itself is at right now and the growth of it, and once it peaks, how it's going to taper off, using all of that information to really help us monitor and adjust and move through and navigate this whole summer. So specifically, when it comes to the cash flow component, we're going to leverage what we've already learned. In the first place, we have looked at where our finances are at, where our cash flows are. We know where our cash reserves are. We know where our fixed costs are going to be for the year. We know how much as owners we need to pay ourselves. We know or we can anticipate how much we're going to have to spend to be able to reboot potentially next year. And where do our cash reserves stack up from there compared to that? From there, we're going to want to start to look at cash inflow options, whether it be financing. So be prepared to self-finance as the owner or seek that financing. All the stuff that we've been talking about up until this point, your investors and your debtors are going to want this information. So not just necessarily the financial components, but your plan as well. They're going to want to hear the story out, and they're going to want to have confidence in you and what you plan to do coming out to next year. So accumulate as much of this as you can right now and start the process. If you're in a position where you need to start seeking financing, that CARES Act was approved last Friday, and there's been a lot more information that's available that you can start to apply to and start that process. cash in components is we eventually want to be able to have the customers coming in, right? So identifying and monitoring key indicators to help predict when those cash inflows are going to start coming in. The things that we look at are going to be bookings. We're going to be watching the media. We're going to be following different social groups and start to get a feel for the comfort behind when consumers are confident enough to reintroduce, to come back into the market. There are a number of experts that you can follow, like on LinkedIn, on Facebook. There's all kinds of different groups. Join these groups and really gain a pulse for what other outfitters are experiencing in your area as well as across the nation. The other way to make sure that we're really intentional behind our cash flow is to start reducing our cash out. So identifying those key employees and those key vendors that'll provide with the best return, leverage those relationships, have a game plan on what you're going to do for the rest, utilize your current infrastructure, and consider bringing back like old offerings if you need to match those customers' needs, and restructure payment plans and debts and all kinds of other cash out options to get you to potentially next summer. When we're building, once we've built, now we want to execute this plan, it's going to be super important to communicate with all of the stakeholders and to communicate with them regularly. We're going to want to state the facts as we know them. We're going to want to describe current and, if known, future impacts of what's taking place. This is especially important when we're working with our employees. We're going to want to demystify the fear and outline steps that we as an organization are taking to protect them and what we're trying to do to move forward. And we're going to want to be super open. So employees are going to understand. Everyone knows that this is a pandemic right now, and it's better to potentially have temporary unemployment and a job to come back to than to have the business totally go under and have no job at all. And as we're executing this plan, the thing we're going to want to do is we're going to want to stay mobile. So monitor, adjust, monitor, adjust, monitor, adjust. This is going to be what's necessary from today all the way through until the rebound takes place. A really good way to handle this is to do scenario planning. When we're doing scenario planning, we want to define our scopes, the issues, time horizons. We want to define key drivers, collect and analyze data, develop scenarios, apply scenarios, and then maintain and update those. So here's some information that was produced by Arrival recently, and they're experts on a global level on how they, at this point, anticipate the rebound to take place. In an article, they talk about the lockdown mode, which is where everybody's in right now. After lockdown, there's going to need to be some easing, some customer easing, and like making sure that they're starting to get confident and wanting to return into the travel and into essentially spending money again. And then from there, there's recovery. So based on where their predictions are, and these are things, this is just information that's out there that we can utilize to help us plan, is the time frame on an optimistic level is that they anticipate the lockdown to last until middle of, or the optimistic is like the lockdown will end, potentially start in May, but people are still going to be in an easing mode until August, September time period. They're not going to look to even return to traveling and return to starting to spend money really again until September. And then we won't actually be in recovery until spring of next year, okay? That's the optimistic side. And on the pessimistic side, they don't anticipate the lockdown to actually be alleviated until the middle of June. If that's the case, the easing could take place all the way until next spring, and they don't anticipate recovery to be until April of 2022. It's not the most enjoyable information, but it is stuff that like we need to absolutely become comfortable with, and this is the information that we can use to start to plan accordingly. The other stuff that they came up with is this forecasts, again, this is on a global level, so it may not necessarily consider like what your local economy is, but they've taken what the tourism industries were selling on a global side, and they had like 2018's numbers, 2019's numbers, and then what they anticipate for 2020. So what this is showing is on an optimistic side, they anticipate a decline of sales to be about a 70% drop. So they're anticipating sales for 2020 to be about 30% of what they were last year, and as low as 20%. Then by 2021, by 2022, it'll be almost fully recovered, and 2021 will be somewhere in between. So this is just information that's out there to really help us in forecasting and planning. This information is not very optimistic. However, that being the case, we need to become comfortable with these worst case scenarios. And essentially the worst case scenario is that there's not going to be a rebound until 2021. And at that point, like, what is it how are we going to handle ourselves accordingly? Hillary sent me a couple different options that she wanted us to do some discussions on when it comes to different sizes of businesses. The first option and scenario was a medium-sized business that has some year-round employees and many seasonal employees. Perhaps you have some reserves, but not enough to keep employees on no or low income. So you guys are looking for loans. If this is the case, we still want to go through those same processes. So we know financially where we're at. We don't have all of the reserves. Maybe we have 3 to 6 months of reserves, and we're needing to start seeking loans. So figure out what loans are available, and especially with this CARES Act, what is the best applicable to you. There are some with total relief that you may not have to pay back. So those options are really, really good. The separation of key employees is figuring out who your top managers are, and those individuals that are going to be super important for navigating the complexities of your finances, of your operations, your top managers, essentially, making sure that you have enough cash on hand to be able to pay those individuals. Looking, when it comes to the other employees, looking at what's going to take place over the next 3 months, the next 6 months, the next year, to monitor where your reservations are at, to monitor where your deposits are, and figure out how you need to staff up the remainder of the other employees, and to be in front of your customers that are your key people. If you're a mid-sized business, you most likely know who your ideal customers are. You most likely know who your target markets are, and you probably have a really good pulse on how to get in front of those individuals. So you're in a good position to do some targeted marketing and to reach out to those individuals and be that first trigger, that first outlet when people are interested to get outside. The other scenario is a smaller outfit that only hires seasonally, starting in potentially May or June, and don't have so much in reserves, have a narrower season window, and don't know if they should even open up at all if it's only going to be about 2 months. So in this case, you're fortunate in that you don't have any other employees, that you're only hiring seasonal. Most likely those seasonal workers have other jobs or other income sources that they've been running with in the past. The conversations I'm having with the owners in this position is that they've already reached out to a lot of these employees, and those employees are like super ambitious and excited to get involved, and have even indicated like they'd work with no pay essentially. And just to be open and honest with them as to where the timing of everything is. The issues that we're seeing also across the nation is individual rivers are shutting down, or individual governments are shutting down, and there's like no start dates or no open dates for your particular outfit to be able to go through. You know, looking at those situations and where your unique demographic is going to be is going to more so dictate what your options would be. Because the smaller outfits don't have as much overhead, you don't have to absorb as much, but it's going to be super important to be open with those guides as to when there is an opportunity for income to start coming in and to be available for those trips that take place should the restrictions lift and everything else. Okay. So in summary, the process and the order with which we want to handle a essentially like disaster recovery and a business continuity plan is to first and foremost look internal. Remind ourselves of the foundation. Where are we at financially? Where are our non-financial assets and the strengths that we have with our customers, our vendors, and our employees? From there, we want to do a SWOT analysis to figure out where our gaps are and to be able to look externally for that additional funding, for those resources that are going to really be able to help us get through this. And then that's how we build and execute a plan, always having cash flow at the front of our mind, communicating with all of the stakeholders that are integrated within our business, and to continue to be mobile and responsive to what we're seeing on a daily basis. Well, on more of a reoccurring basis in a time that there is just so many unknowns at this point. So are there any questions?
All right, I am popping back on. Thank you so much, Zeb. We've got Aaron here as well. So everyone, go ahead and write in your questions and I will pass them off. The first question is, Cricket wanted us to go over the loan options that outfitters have right now. Aaron, I'm going to let you take that one.
I believe Cricket's asking about the personal payroll protection loan. And there's another loan that's available out there called EIDL, Emergency Income
Economic Injury Disaster Loan.
Disaster loan, yeah. Yeah, gosh, yeah, thank you very much. The one we're spending a lot of time with right now is the personal protection program. I definitely encourage people, if they're looking at wanting to do that, to get in touch with their local bank and see if their local bank is a lender. The Treasury Department has information up on their website that lending will begin tomorrow, or they'll begin accepting applications starting tomorrow. And so we can get into more about what would be forgiven under that loan and what the calculation for that would be. And I would point you guys to a newsletter that we'll have going out a little bit later today that has a lot of those frequently, we put together a frequently asked questions document that gets to a lot of that. So yeah, I would encourage you to look at that. The other piece I don't unfortunately have my head wrapped around quite as well, but I hope to soon, is with an EIDL loan, I believe within 3 days of applying for it, you receive $10,000. If you take the loan, you don't have to pay that $10,000 back. So almost for every applicant, it's free $10,000 if you go through the SU website, as I understand it.
Yep, you're right. And that particular loan is the EIDL one is for business owners with under 500 employees. It's the sole proprietors, the self-employed, the contractors. The loan or the application itself is like 3 minutes. I've posted the source documents and all of the resources to this Facebook group. So there's a lot of really good information that you could go through and read, as well as a video on a financial planner that released this like yesterday as to how to actually apply for the EIDL one specifically. And like I said, it takes like 3 minutes or something. It's a really good just kind of walk through tutorial, but all of that information too is on this this Facebook group.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Thank you, Zeb, and thanks for having that out there. And we what do I want to say? We appreciate your advocacy and your outreach on that, and having taken a look at the loan application on the website, they're definitely trying to streamline the application process, so it looks a lot easier than it would have looked even a week ago.
The other thing that I'm hearing too is with unemployment as well as these loan options, these institutions are being really overwhelmed with a lot of applications, whether it's your own state unemployment offices or the SBA. They have streamlined it. You'll see in like the EIDL application that it's all self-verification, so they're not going back through and verifying the information at this point. There are the one component that the video is that the video talked about that I posted to this group is saying that they're basically using your credit score to determine eligibility or not. I don't know personally if that is a full grant right away or if there are components to it that you might have to pay it back. However, again, those source documents are on this website. I can also email them to you if you want to email me, and I'll provide you all the information that I have so far.
Awesome.
All right, Peter asked, can a seasonal business apply for the PPP loan?
Zeb, do you know the answer? I can answer it.
So to my understanding, you can still apply. So there's definitely requirements as to when you're bringing your employees on and whether you had been operational during this time period or not. The equations and the calculations that they're looking for is something like 2.5% of your annual payroll, so or 2.5 months. So if you were to take 12 months of payroll, divide it by 12, multiply that by 2.5, that's the amount of loan that you could qualify for. But there are particular requirements that, depending on when you would be employing employees, that may not align with your needs.
I'm going to tag on to that too and point out that there's a seasonal calculation. It works better for some people than it does for other people. You can either do, as you talked about, Zeb, you can do the 12-month calculation, divide that by 12 to get your monthly average. Seasonal operators can look at the 12-week period beginning February 15th and ending June 30th, or at the election or at your election, you can start March 1st, is what I'm reading here, and then take the average monthly income from those 3 months, right? So you might, it's whichever calculation works better for you, get you there. And of course, whatever you spend on that on payroll would be forgiven.
Payroll, there's also rents, utilities. There are particular requirements surrounding what you can use it to spend money on.
Yeah, rent, utilities, mortgage insurance, payroll, and I believe benefits, employee benefits. Yeah. Did we answer that question well enough? I think? Oh, the other thing I would say is, like, you take that average, you take your average monthly payroll, whether you figure it out 12 months or whether you figure it out on 4 months, and 2.5 times that number is what your loan amount can be.
Right. Okay, so Maris asked, if your personal bank is not an SBA lender, what are your options?
So you always get to go first.
Yeah. I mean, look at what other bank options are. I mean, there are, as far as I know, there are ways, I guess, you can go directly to. I'm not sure exactly on the logistics. The preferred vendors obviously are going to be your first ones, at least locally. So like our preferred vendor here, the first one that was announced was First Southwest Bank. And then real quickly, it was known that other banks were doing it too. You know, so the preferred vendors were just who probably already had the relationships and were already used to working with businesses that were small business loan businesses, but they're being very open with other institutions too. So you leverage your existing relationships first. They're probably going to have the connections with the other banks in your local area, and they'll be able to best position you as to who is navigating this. in your own network.
Yeah, I think you know, the bill expanded pretty significantly the number of institutions that could be loaning institutions. And if you go to the SBA website, they direct you to themselves to look for lists of banks that can lend. And I bet that they'll have a hard time keeping that list current with the way that banks are expanding. So certainly look to SBA.gov and see if you can find banks in your area that are lending, and just call around, because there's gonna be somebody who is, even if they're not on that list.
Yep. Okay, so are the two programs mutually exclusive? Can you apply for both?
Okay, so that answer I'm not clear on, honestly. I was on a call yesterday with an accountant who's specifically spending a lot of work on it. I'll ask her if she could put that information onto the group and see what she can deliver. But I believe there was like a one or the other decision that we were having to make in our phone call yesterday. So I think it might be you can do the PPP or the EIDL, but you may not be able to do both. But I'm not 100% on that.
Right. Yeah, I don't think people are, because in a webinar I gleaned off of, they were advising people to apply for both of them. And it would be like try to be strategic and what you have, and work with the CPA and what you have in terms of your payroll, what you have in terms of what can be forgiven, like try to leverage that PPP loan towards that, and what you want, just like a low interest loan that you know you'll have to repay, and you want a free $10,000, you should go for that EIDL loan.
So that's exactly what we did on the call yesterday. Is we were looking at that particular outfit situation. We were doing projections on what we believe the different loan balances could be and the opportunity for them to be forgiven. So we really looked at the situation of that particular operator and where their seasonality was, and we looked at all those different components as to what we believed he could qualify for, and what that, not just the qualification, but what could be relieved. So that was the biggest question in yesterday's conversation, is like what amount of these loans could also be forgiven. And we built comfort around just knowing, okay, well, even if this amount isn't going to be forgiven, in that particular case, the decision was to go ahead and go with the loan. So we had the cash to be able to sit on an inexpensive financing option should it not take place, you know. So there's a lot of questions in terms of the logistics and the timing and the paying of that, but going through those scenarios with the loans itself is really important to figure out how you can best leverage your options. And then also on that too, the EIDL questionnaire, I went through it last night and I was reading through and seeing what all the questions were on the EIDL one. Is it does specifically call out and ask if you are getting funding from any of the other different CARES or relief package options. So I think that might be a option for them, or way for them to kind of minimize. I mean, I don't know. So I just don't know. But I did see that question.
Good insight.
Peter asked, do you have any info on the tax credit for each employee you retain?
Tax credit for each employee you retain.
It says a $5,000 tax credit.
I don't know that information.
I haven't heard that either. We'll look into that, Peter, and we'll try to get back to you. There certainly are incentives for retaining staff, but I've seen them in terms of loan forgiveness. Not the CARES Act, but it's like sick leave and family medical leave. There's a tax credit for that. Circle back with you. Thanks, Peter.
Okay, so this one's a little bit different. Graham wanted to know, do we think it's okay to ask some of your customers to help out what they can by buying gift certificates and things like that? Any opinions on that?
Yeah, so the gift certificates and the returning of deposits and all that has been super popular on Facebook groups. So like there's a Facebook group that's a tourpreneur, it's a global group. There's been a lot of discussions and people are coming up with all kinds of different creative ideas on how to handle gift certificates, on how to handle deposits, and how to handle returns. Essentially, I think you really need to look at, like, again, where your operations are and what your different offerings would be, and be responsive to what your customers are doing. So some outfits have already gone through their first big wave. This is what we're seeing. Most people went through their first big wave of cancellations and they stuck with their return policies, or maybe they were flexible in that option there too. Okay. Now we're starting to see other then future reservations tapered off, and I'm sure future reservations are going to continue to be low. But I was speaking with another outfitter yesterday, and they're saying that they're actually seeing reservations coming in later in the summer. And in particular, those reservations are bigger group reservations who want to, essentially claim having the opportunity to go down, take their trips, take their programs out this summer, right? So the decision with those bigger group options were to go ahead and let them make their deposits. They wanted the peace of mind to know that there was that opportunity for them to do this group trip. However, it was super important to be super communicative with them and open with them on knowing that there's a high potential these could be canceled. Here's what our policy is. Stick with the policy you currently have in place, and be flexible with them, right? So being completely visible in terms of like what your expectations and intentions are is really, really good. For the more like inexpensive options, maybe not necessarily like the big group services, maybe the individuals who are just getting like, $100 a day kind of deal or $30 a day kind of deal. I would look at the volume with which you anticipate to do this, and look at what administratively it's going to take to be able to manage that, and do it accordingly. Some people have chosen to just do gift cards like crazy. I know from a administrative standpoint, it seems to cause a lot of confusion, a lot of work to kind of keep that organized. But if you're in a position where you cannot truly afford cash-wise to pay all this back, then that might have to be your only option. I think the reflection on that point is where your cash balances are too. If you have all of your deposits that came in and your operating cash is well above that, and your operating cash is still in a position where you aren't reliant on that money, then maybe refunds are a better option. But if your cash is to the point where you can't afford to pay back all of those refunds, those gift cards seem to be what people are using as a way to retain that cash.
Yeah, that's good. I think we've seen sort of the gamut of approaches with folks who have to keep it really tight, definitely sticking to their cancellation policies, and a lot of people who, let's say, are trying to keep a lot of cash on hand, are trying to extend a gift certificate, extend credit policy for themselves, and try to keep some money in the bank.
Yeah. And hopefully you're not self-insured for those reasons. Yeah.
So it is 2 o'clock. There are a lot more questions. A lot of them are going to be answered in our FAQs. Should we keep taking questions, or should we just try to make sure that we keep this list and make sure that they're answered in our mailing that's going out today?
Yeah, me too. I can hang out to take some of the probably the more reoccurring questions.
Okay. Do either of you know how they are categorizing what can be included in utilities for the PPP loan?
Go ahead, Zeb. I'll look it up while you're talking.
I haven't looked at them specifically. I mean, just looking at the general descriptions, It's going to be to maintain your facilities, right? So they're calling out rents, they're calling out mortgage insurance. I mean, they want you to essentially keep your doors open. I don't know if like your cell phone they would necessarily allow, but it seems like just in general, it's pretty flexible from what I'm hearing. So.
Yeah, I don't see a lot of specificity around definitions on that. Just simply, they're just calling it utilities. They're calling it rent. They're calling it interest on mortgage obligations. Folks are interested in payroll costs. I could get into what some of the employee benefits are that they cover, but it's what you'd expect.
And generally, utilities are going to be your electric, your gas, your water, standard utility costs.
Right.
Yeah, Scott was asking about like insurance and permit fees and things like that that are kind of non-standard, I think.
Yeah, insurance and permits fees are not generally classified as utilities. So those are going to be more of your operating costs associated with your business. They are going to be fixed overhead. Insurance specifically, I would really encourage you to reach out to your insurance brokers. That's one of those external resources that's going to be a tremendous asset for you to start to negotiating out and modifying your insurance. What was the other one, Hillary?
Yeah, just insurance and permit fees.
Okay. Yep, and permit fees. In the Facebook group, there was a discussion on permit fees yesterday, and an outfitter out of California indicated how they had an issue with the forest a couple years ago. I think it was like in 14 during a downturn that they had, and the forest didn't allow them to basically avoid the use fees because it wasn't a requirement of the Forest Service that they shut down. It was their own outfit's interest for shutting down, so they didn't relinquish the permit fees. So your best bet there is to know who those vendors are or who it is that you're paying those fees to, and to call them up directly and to try and have them work with you. I think within this whole pandemic, there is a potential they'll be more flexible, but it's going to really take you to connect with those individuals, let them know your situation, try and make your case, and roll with that.
Yeah, that's good. Certainly, the direction coming out of the Washington office is empowering local offices to make local decisions. So the line officer that you talk to is going to be a good point of contact. And as a point of order, the Park Service is looking to defer fees, and I think the Forest Service is looking to forgive fees as sort of one of the few levers they can pull, and certainly defer them if folks are in situations where you send in a payment for estimated use, right? It's kind of hard for everybody to figure out their estimated use on this summer right now, so I believe they are being flexible on that too.
If we're going to be, worst case scenario, become comfortable and see what your options are going to be for zero. If you can become comfortable with that and know what your game plan is for zero this year, then anything else, if there's any other changes, we know that worst case scenario, we're planning for it, we're comfortable with it. Anything beyond that is just icing on the cake, right? It's a lot easier to go and know what the worst case scenario is going to be, and then to be able to modify on top of that, versus trying to keep our head in the clouds and believe this thing's going to be good and then eventually get to the worst case scenario. That's going to be a lot more expensive, and it's going to be cause a lot more heartache and heartburn. But if we can approach all this and know our answers for there not being a single sale this summer, truly think about that and really become comfortable with it, then as this rebound takes place and as we start to generate sales, it's a lot easier to navigate those changes that direction. And I think the same thing is true for figuring out what these permit uses.
Gosh, I have to think that some people looking at that calculation, how long can I go making zero? How long can these loans float? These loans don't work for me. That part of that calculation has to be how long can I keep doing this?
Yep, and being really honest. That's what I opened up with, like our own risk tolerance as as the owners, right? So it's going to be as the owners, it's going to be really you on the line and what your decision, your aptitude to be able to float this is going to be. Being open, being honest, being real with what that zero looks like, and using this year to maybe close down early and seek other funding if you need to, might be your best option. It's really going to be where are your cash reserves, where's your risk tolerance for you personally, and how can you navigate it? If you can find short-term employment potentially to be able to also, if you are in a position where you need to have income to be able to support your family or whatever else, and you temporarily shut the doors down until the rebound takes place, you find other employment, that's what you got to do. You know, your financial planners are going to be really good resources to help you figure out, you know, what it is that you can risk to lose by just trying to ride this thing out. Alternatively, if the business is doing well and if you're in a position with your particular outfit where you're not experiencing a whole lot of governmental closures or your local economy is rebounds a lot sooner than other ones, well, that's again icing on the cake, you know, to be available and to be open, to know who your employees are and to know where your guides are at, to be able to call on them when that rebound takes place would be awesome. But I mean, everybody I've talked to has been entirely against. I mean, I've seen and I spoke with everybody on the dire straits end, all the way to those that again are sitting on a year's worth of cash and not concerned at all. There's a huge gamut, and there's going to be a lot of outfitters that lose their outfits this year. But you don't have to lose it, right? You might just have to make the decision, not this year. Let's get to next year. And in order for us to get to next year, maybe we have to close this door down, find other kind of employment elsewhere, and then know what it's going to cost us to reboot next year. If you're in a position where you need to do that, you're probably not in the best position to try and ride these things out, hoping to just capture some kind of income, generally speaking. But you really need to look at and critically look at your own situation and figure out your own game plan.
Yeah, thanks, Deb.
Should we keep going? All right. Can you describe the requirements to have the PPP loan forgiven for a seasonal business?
No, I can do a Google search.
Aaron,
Not
why don't you take
offhand.
this
I'm
one?
not the expert in that.
You know, the big deal is that you employ people. So if you get the loan and then you furlough staff and you don't pay any payroll, the payroll is not going to be forgiven. And in fact, if folks have already furloughed people, or worse, I do understand that there's a program in here to incentivize you to hire them back and get them covered under payroll protection. You know, part of what CARES is trying to do is to use businesses rather than unemployment to pay everybody, right? So if you hire back to 75% of your your average staff from whatever metric you're using for 2019, if you hire back to that by June 30th of 2020, then whatever that payroll is that you use can be forgiven. And the other piece would be approximately 25% more than that can forgive those other things, interest, rent, utilities.
Yeah, and even doing, I mean, Google searches on this, like the amount of information that's coming out on a daily basis surrounding this is incredible. Like I did a Google search just saying PPP for seasonal employment, and right off the bat, you know, there's Treasury Gov, there's a law company, there's a community bank, and all of this was released, you know, in the last day or two.
Yeah.
So more people are getting more clarity, and there's a lot more information. With those questions, call up the banks, call up professionals, get on Google, and even though you may not know the exact answer, just become loosely comfortable enough with your options to reach out to people who can better guide you.
Yeah, I'm using the the treasury.gov stuff in the bill. Yeah, works.
All right. Scott asked, do we know of a timeline for businesses to receive the financing for the PPP loan?
Zeb,
Nothing.
I've been trying to figure that out. Thank you. It's not the first time anybody's asked that question. There's sort of this tension between them wanting to get money in people's hands really quickly and what's going to be an overwhelmed government agency. So I would expect it to take longer than they start to predict. But we will get answers to you as we can. Keep an eye on the COVID-19 webpage at americaoutdoors.org. And keep an eye on our newsletters and on our Facebook group. And when stuff like that comes out, we'll certainly get it to you. And Zeb has a Facebook group. Sure, he'd be happy to get that out to you as well.
Again, PPP loan timing, Google search by Lexology.com. The term of the EIDL loan is 30 years. The term of the PPP loan is 10 years. The first payment of the EIDL loan is due 1 year from the origination date plus interest, and the first payment on the PPP loan will be due 6 months as determined by the lending bank. That doesn't necessarily say when you'll be getting the money, but it does say when you anticipate to start paying it back. Google, wonderful right now, and it's spot on.
Didn't answer the question. It's a question, but it got close.
Let's see. For the EIDL, is anything else forgivable in that besides the $10,000 advance?
So in the application on the EIDL, I mean, it just asks for the 10K. I mean, it's not asking for as far as what I've seen with the EIDL, it doesn't even ask you how much do you want. It just says, do you want to get the $10,000, yes or no? That's what I've seen with the EIDL one. So I don't know if the PPP one seems to be the one where you can calculate out and figure out what your maximum potential would be. But at least with the EIDL application, it's simply, do you want 10K, yes or no?
Yeah. Huh, fascinating. And so, and in terms of loan forgiveness, if it goes above and beyond that, the only place I see loan forgiveness happening is with payroll, specifically through the PPP. I don't think other things are forgiven. Besides the 10K, if you get a bigger loan, a bigger EIDL loan, there's not additional forgiveness. It's just a low interest loan.
All right. Well, there's a lot of other conversation going on about the tax credit. Like we said, we're gonna dig into that and try to get you some resources quickly.
People have answers out there that they want to share with us, or are they all inquiring about it?
They did drop a URL in that we can investigate, and anyone else can see that. Peter put it in for the group. Cricket chimed in on some stuff, so we'll dig into that. And then, yeah, you know, some of these other questions we've kind of covered. Some of them we will definitely cover in the frequently asked questions, so keep an eye out for that coming out soon in, you know, about an hour or so.
Okay, great. And thanks to folks for sharing those resources, because like as we've been working through this and trying to disseminate, people are just throwing good information at us, and as it becomes suitable, we push it back out to the community as they feel comfortable sharing it. So thanks for that, for sure. And yeah, if you have those resources, you're posting here. If you want to send them our way, that's great. And it's really like the expertise of the community and sort of the vigilance of it is really shining, I think, right now. So I appreciate everybody's support and effort.
Well, it is the information age. I mean, this stuff's getting populated quick, and there's a lot of opportunity for us through these groups and through the communities that we have to find some information and to get it available and out there to the right people. So that's what I really have found interesting in a lot of these Facebook groups, just watching the camaraderie and the communities that are engaging and how people are interacting. And this is a global issue, right? I mean, it's not just one of the disruptions that as outfitters we see is a lot of times like some kind of environmental or like local disaster that takes place, whether it be fire or whatever else. What's unique about this is truly on a global perspective and everybody's affected by it. And that being the case, everybody's working with each other on trying to rebound. So that's exciting. And with that, I think there's a lot of eyes that are out there and there's a lot of resources producing free information and really trying to get all of us to get back to life. Who knows how long that's going to be and what that's going to look like, but yeah, use those resources.
Yeah, good advice. Yeah.
Well,
do you want to ask anything else, Hillary? Or are we wrapping up?
No, I think we should wrap up. I want to get this email out, so I think that we should wrap up. And if people have questions, if they feel like they didn't get answered, send it to me in an email, and we will make sure that we cover it. Zeb, thank you so much for your time. I feel like first and foremost, it should help people feel more confident in their decision making and making some projections for the year, and then just following the blueprint that they make for themselves.
Yep, absolutely. I hope that works too. I mean, it's what we're doing right now with the outfitters for the last couple of weeks, and it's that step and what I went through today has brought so much clarity and just alleviated so much pressure. People are looking optimistically at where things are going and really starting to find the opportunities that are available in this thing, provided the limited knowledge and that we have surrounding what's going to take place. But yeah, I just hope that the information helps you and your guys' outfits just become more comfortable. So we will get through this.
Yes. Yeah.
But
we will survive.
thank you guys.
Thanks everybody for joining.